The week the stars held their breath, the council measured time in procedures and recesses. Earth measured time in coffins. Beneath a vaulted lattice of crystal and vacuum, 200 species sat in rings of authority. They glittered in robes, carapace, mist, and light. At the floor, small against the amphitheater of empires, stood Ambassador Alina Park of Earth, black suit, plain shoes, a lapel pin shaped like an olive branch, and a shield. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was not. The docket recognizes Lord Marshal Kor of the Drakhale Dominion. Intoned the speaker, a translucent elder who had seen continents rise and sink. Kor rose, 9 feet of sinew and ritual metal, his crest etched by 1,000 duels. "Honored Council," he thundered, "the upstart humans filed papers for extraction rights in the Sable Corridor, 17 systems. The Dominion patrolled those lanes for centuries. Honor predates paperwork." Murmurs rippled, agreeable and old. Alina asked for the floor and received it. "The corridor was unclaimed. We scouted, surveyed, and registered as your law requires. If the Dominion wished to claim it, you had a millennium to write your name." "Your species thinks ink equals blood," Kor snarled. "We bled." His officers rose behind him, claws bared the ceremonial width, threat without saying the word. The speaker's filaments trembled for order. "Decorum." Kor was not listening. "You will withdraw your filings within 30 standard days. You will pay tribute for the insult. You will acknowledge station." Alina's eyes did not flinch. "Earth rejects your ultimatum." The old species shifted, disturbed. Most of them believed in arbitration and committees that took years to draft footnotes. They disliked the taste of the word no. But Earth had learned the word on frontiers and in courtrooms, on picket lines and at beaches with names. Normandy, Incheon, still remembered. We learned it at dinner tables, too, when a child's safety was on the line. Behind Alina sat 5 aides in plain suits. They wrote nothing down. They watched the Dominion leave in a storm of armor. That night, Alina sent an encrypted packet to Cheyenne Deep. Her message was simple: expect the test. Protect the young. It came sooner than even the Dominion intended. Officially, Kor's fleet meant only to demonstrate superiority over New Thessaly, an agricultural colony with 2 patrol boats, and a hospital that smelled of citrus and antiseptic. They would cut the orbital power relays to the militia depot, slag a drone hangar, then transmit a lecture about honor. The Dominion's gunnery officer, competent, not cruel, split a beam to strike 2 targets in sequence. A microsecond jitter slipped past a sensor that hadn't failed in decades. The beam sheared 4 degrees. From the school's window bank, a girl named Rosa saw the sky write a white line. She thought it looked like a chalk mark on blue slate. Her teacher began to say down. The hospital's pediatric ward, the cafeteria, the playground dome, the line erased them. Air became glass, laughter became steam. 841, 842. When the counts finished after the fires and the miscounts, the number was 849. The council first quoted 847, then 849 after audits. To Alina Park, the figure was a room full of names she could not. Kor ordered ceasefire at once. He opened a channel with his crest lowered. "By our code, this is my fault. The Dominion accepts full reparations and penalty." His technicians dumped logs, the apology hurt, and it was honest. The council convened an emergency session. Statements were immaculate, sums were generous. The speaker urged reconciliation. Everything by galactic custom should have been over. Earth went silent. 3 days, no press conferences, no angry oaths, no flames on feeds. Ports closed their manifests. Schools kept attendance and counselors worked overtime. Choirs practiced without audiences. On the 4th dawn, Alina walked back beneath the crystal lattice with eyes swollen by a private grief she would not let the galaxy witness as spectacle. "We accept the Dominion's apology," she said, voice low and clear. "We acknowledge the accident. We withdraw from the corridor and will sign such instruments as end this dispute. We request 30 days to build a memorial." Relief exhaled like a weather front. Delegates praised maturity. Alina bowed. The speaker smiled with the relief of a parent who has avoided a hard talk. Only a few noticed that she never said what kind of memorial. In Cheyenne Deep, Admiral Naomi Ortiz laid her hand on a key she had sworn never to turn. She had been a Marine at Fallujah and a captain when Artemis vanished beyond Pluto. Her grandchildren's drawings were still taped to her console. A park, a cat, a starship shaped like a whale. "Ma'am," said Colonel Imani Brooks, "if we start, we cannot pretend we didn't." Ortiz looked at a wall where an artist had painted a phrase from an old, difficult century. "We do these things not because they are easy." She remembered another line from a different century, "but because we must." "Begin Project Lantern," she said, "and call the chaplains. The work we're about to do needs witnesses." Project Lantern did not look like war, not at first. It looked like factories remembering their first language. It looked like asteroids with old scars waking to new engines. It looked like long, quiet trains in Nebraska and Xinjiang, and the Trans-Amazon hauling things no one photographed. The treaties had converted shipyards into cruise lines and weapons mills into farm machinery plants. The blueprints had not been erased. They had been memorized. Admiral Ortiz's command was buried so deep the Rockies above it felt like just another ceiling. Maps covered the walls, not political borders, but supply chains and signal routes, pilgrimage worlds and academies, the places a culture keeps its soul. Lantern was not aimed at bodies. Lantern was aimed at meaning. "Status," Ortiz said. Brooks slid reports across the table. "Industrial surge nominal. The Sargasso yards in the belt can turn out hulls at peacetime rates and retrofit in transit. Commonwealth Aerospace has recalled retirees. Boeing Space Lab reopened Bay 7. Sao Paulo Orbital has unsealed its antimatter vaults under Vatican supervision. The Pacific Shipwrights Union just swore in 3,000 apprentices. All volunteer. We have not conscripted a single person." "Not a lever we touch unless the house is on fire," Ortiz said. Elena Park sent no speeches. She wrote letters, one to Core, one to the speaker, and one to a school on New Thessaly whose surviving students were meeting in a church basement. In them she did not threaten, she explained. "There is law," she wrote, "and then there is duty. Law is a tool, duty is a promise. We will not confuse them." In classrooms across Earth, teachers paused their syllabi. They talked about the Articles of Confederation and why they failed, about the Reconstruction Amendments and why they mattered, about child labor laws and the moment a society decided childhood should be protected time, not cheap fuel. In mosques and synagogues and churches and temples, clergy spoke about covenant, an old human word that meant you and I stand between danger and the little ones. In barber shops and bodgas and tribal longhouses and corner diners, owners put a hand on the counter and said, "We don't bargain with harm. That's not what neighbors do." Lantern's rules of engagement were 3 sentences long. 1. Do not murder. 2. Do not lie about what you are doing. 3. Remove the ability of the attacker to ever threaten a child again. Short rules are heavier to carry. Colonel Brooks briefed the teams who would disappear. "You are not the point of the spear," she told them. "You are the hand that takes away the spear rack." The teams had learned to move like rumor and to stand like door frames. They spoke 6 languages of the Dominion's military net and knew how to make an engine sound like a hymn. "Do we tell the council what we're about to do?" a captain asked. Ortiz shook her head. "We will not ask permission to protect children, but we will account for every action afterward. Write your logs as if a jury of orphans will read them." On Kepler Station, Elena Park met Core in a private room. He had removed his armor and his crest was dimmed. He began to apologize again. Elena let him finish. "I know it was a malfunction," she said. "I know you would have thrown your body in front of that beam with your own hands if you could. I believe you, but belief does not resurrect." "What would satisfy humans?" he asked, not angrily, but like a man asking for a map in a blizzard. Elena set a small device on the table. It projected a different kind of memorial than stone, a contract, the Children's Charter of Saul, 5 articles. The first 2 were boring on purpose, jurisdiction notifications. The third was a promise of absolute sanctuary for any child of any signatory species on human-administered ground. The fourth was a pledge of immediate mutual defense if any party's children were targeted. The fifth was the one core read twice. If you harm a human child, we will dismantle your ability to be a civilization for 3 generations. It was written without anger. Anger fades, structure endures. This is extortion, Core said softly. This is a boundary, Elena said. Every healthy relationship has one. When she left, Core touched the table where the light had been. His palm left no print. Outside, ships made of prayer and mathematics aligned for trajectories. Cheyenne Deep went a partial Sabbath that evening. Kitchens cooked for too many. The chaplains scheduled extra hours. Ortiz dismissed her staff early and stood alone in the empty command room, listening to the hum of the mountain. On the wall, someone had pinned the oldest of American sentences. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The sentence had never been a spell. It had always been a job description. At dawn, Lantern moved. The first things to fall were not cities. They were stories. On Arx Vadam, where the Dominion swore cadets into the war creed, 12 pylons traced constellations of founding battles into the sky. Lantern did not topple the pylons. A microburst from a human cutter fused the inscriptions into blank, pearl-smooth stone. The oath space still stood, beautiful, empty, unreadable. In 12 worlds, 12 such erasures occurred at once. Priests of the creed lifted their hands and found nothing for those hands to bless. The second wave lay under mountains and parades. Human teams entered academies through wastewater tunnels and service shafts with bags that looked like lunch pails. They left behind devices that did not explode so much as decide. When activated, the weapons whispered a storm of fast, heavy particles that passed through steel like gossip and through living tissue like a winter. Lights stayed on. Holo portraits still saluted from walls. An hour later, janitors found lecture notes on desks next to coffee cups that had grown cold beside the cooling flesh of instructors who would never finish the paragraph. The buildings were intact. The future trained inside them was gone. Report, Brooks said into the net. Valkyrie sites clear. 22 academies, 8 doctrine centers, 3 staff colleges, 0 collateral, came the replies. On the cultural worlds, Lantern was not cruel. It was meticulous. Libraries were not burned. Their indexes were scrambled and re-scrambled until cross-reference became labyrinth. Composer shrines opened to reveal silence. Parade grounds were plowed in straight lines and seeded with native grasses, and a poem about mercy installed in small brass plates beneath the sod. Poems in Drakhali, composed by human translators who had spent nights getting the meter right. It is a particular kind of warfare to kill a metaphor while bowing to its grammar. Broadcasts arrived in every Dominion household wired to receive them. They were not threats. They were inventories. This academy is closed. This oath is ended. This shrine will be quiet for 100 years. We chose not to hurt you. Understand why. Corps' war leader, Teen, pounded his fist against a command dais and found that anger did not jam a signal. He sent fleets after ghosts and found only scuffed gravel and leveled reviewing stands. When his home fleet finally intercepted human hulls above Corel, he expected rams and salvos. Instead, he watched ships pivot in ways the Dominion did not think physics allowed. The human flagship Promise opened a channel. Admiral Ortiz appeared, hair pulled back, mouth a straight line someone had measured with a ruler. War leader, she said, you do not have what we want. What is it that you want? Teen asked. A guarantee you are structurally incapable of giving. She lifted a hand. The battle that followed lasted 16 minutes. The Dominion kept the recordings as a teaching aid for a future that never arrived. The council called and called. Lantern did not answer, not to be coy, but because the net to the Dominion had been wrapped in a quiet mesh. The mesh did not sever, it delayed. Every word from the council arrived an hour too late to matter. Elena Park had signed the order in ink, no theatrics, no grand speeches, work like plumbers, fix the leak at the main. After the 16th minute, Teen yielded. Ortiz did not crow. She placed ships over population centers as if placing umbrellas over picnic tables. She read a declaration into the net. Evacuate non-combatants into marked shelters. We will not strike them. Military assets will be disabled cleanly. Cultural objects will be neutralized, not defiled. Your food, water, and medicine are sacrosanct. Any officer who targets civilians will be prosecuted by Earth. Some human captains swallowed hard at the last sentence. War makes cleanliness difficult. Ortiz kept it simple. We are not what hurt our children. Lantern's strangest action came last. On the planet that had once hosted the first hunt, the Dominion's coming of age, human engineers erected a ring of mirrored pylons around the field. At noon, the mirrors focused a circle of harmless light across the soil, etching a line that read, in Drakhaley's script and in English, "The hunt for enemies ends here. The hunt for wisdom begins here." Children wandered the field in the rewoven light and traced their claws across a sentence their grandparents did not know how to finish. When the tally was done, Dominion fleets were junk, their schools were quiet, their shrines could make no music, and their civilians were alive. Lantern did not kill a people. It made their old answers unusable. Alina returned to the council at last. As she looked older, it was not the kind of older you get from birthdays. It was the age carved by judgment. "We are ready to speak," she told the speaker, "but we will not apologize for tending the fire." The chamber smelled faintly of ozone and wet stone, the way big rooms do when too many truths have been spoken in them. 200 delegations waited. Some wore the look of species that had read the news and slept for the first time in years. Others wore the look of gamblers who had lost with a hand they'd been told could not lose. Alina took the platform. She did not raise her voice. The room did that work for her. "By your customs, the Dominion accident has been answered," she said. "By ours it has not. We have not built a statue. We have built constraints." She touched the console. A compact document blossomed into the air, translated 100 ways. The Children's Charter of Sol, Article I Sanctuary. Any child of any signatory who sets foot on a human-administered station, embassy, ship, or territory is inviolable. There are no exceptions. Article Roman II, Mutual Alarm. Harm to signatories, children triggers immediate, collective defense authorized in advance. No new vote required at the moment of fear. Article Roman III, Clarity. No combatant may use children or schools or hospitals as shields. Doing so designates your command unfit to exist. Earth will remove it. Article Roman IV, Witness. Every operation conducted in the name of the Charter will be recorded, preserved, and reviewed by an independent council chaired by orphans of the last war. Article V, Boundary. Any deliberate harm to a human child authorizes Earth to dismantle the attacker's capacity to be a civilization for 3 generations. There were sounds in the room that translations did not carry well. Air sucked between teeth, the tremor of membranes, a chitter that meant we understand, and we hate that we understand. Ambassadors asked their questions in the orderly way of species that trust microphones. Is this proportional? Alina answered, "It is preventative." Is this extortion? No, extortion demands tribute. This demands responsibility. Who enforces the witness clause? Not Earth alone. We want others to hold the mirror. The speaker drifted closer, the light in his chest dimmer than it had been that first day. "Ambassador Park, what if we refuse?" "Then refuse," Alina said softly. "We will withdraw from your council, close our ports, and plan for the day someone repeats the Dominion's mistake. We survived before we met you. We prefer not to have to again." Kor spoke from the Dominion's damaged dignity. His voice surprised the room by holding. "Ambassador, what do you call what you did to us?" Alina did not look away. "Surgery," she said. "We removed the gangrene of a certain idea. If you want your people to walk again, you will learn to use a different leg." He bowed, the bare angle that meant we will attempt. A delegate from a pacifist coalition asked a question that was more prayer than policy. "What will this make of us?" "Safer," Alina said, "and less cruel in the long run. The Charter puts the fear in the right direction." She let the silence learn its own shape. Civilization is not law alone. It is also memory and vows. When we forget, we write new law with blood. We are trying to remember first. The votes took 7 days because some species needed to argue in spirals or sing for 3 nights. While they talked, lanterns stood down in stages. Human ships escorted refugee barges and restocked clinics they had earlier emptied of soldiers. Engineers sent repair crews to broken power grids they had not broken. In restaurant kitchens across the habitats, human cooks taught recipes to Dominion widowers who had never learned to boil an egg. On the 7th day, the speaker read the tally. Acceptance arrived not like thunder, but like a roof finally finished. A few abstained. None voted to oppose. The abstainers were proud, solitary peoples, and Earth's answer was not punishment but a shrug and a map of safe approaches if they ever changed their minds. Elena stepped forward one last time. "You will call this hegemony," she said, "and perhaps you will be right for a while, but we intend something closer to stewardship. Our children taught us to dream about a galaxy where the smallest are safe enough to grow strange and excellent. That is selfish in a way. We want neighbors worth learning from in a century." She gestured and the far wall lit. Names scrolled, New Thessaly's children, the ones who did not come home. The list would fit on stone, it did not fit in hearts. "We do not build monuments well," Elena said. "We build certainties. The charter is a certainty hammered into policy." She left the dais to the sound of species trying out a new word together, amen. Lantern banked its fires, but it did not go dark. There was work left that law could not reach. Pirates who called themselves free, slavers who called their chains heritage, quiet monsters who never fired a beam but fed on fear. The charter would have to be proved not in chambers but in freight lanes and border towns. And somewhere outside the mapped routes, a signal had stirred that was not Dominion, not Council. Admiral Ortiz watched the deep radar bloom. "We fix one leak," she said almost tenderly, "and the next pipe sings." She looked toward the corner where a child's drawing of a whale-shaped starship had curled. "Good, keep the tools out." The first case did not come wrapped in banners or speeches. It came as a freighter's mayday, clipped and breathless, relayed across the Harnack verge by old relay boys with scratches from older wars. "This is the St. Brigid Civilian Registry, carrying grain and schoolbooks and 8 creche pods bound for Calyx Refuge. Pirates have attached. They've boarded. We have children aboard. Repeat, we have children aboard." Before the charter, such a plea would have triggered debates about jurisdiction, indemnity, and whether the pirates counted as a signatory power. After the charter, it triggered Article Roman II, mutual alarm, no vote, no filibuster, the switch flipped. Admiral Naomi Ortiz was already awake because admirals sleep like parents, one ear open for what matters. "Nearest assets?" Colonel Imani Brooks pointed with a stylus. "Patrol cutter Sagan, 3 minutes from intercept. 2 auxiliary rescue corvettes, 8 and 11. A Dominican refugee barge is also nearby, unarmed." "Loop the barge into our net," Ortiz said. "If they want to help, give them something useful to do." On the council floor, some delegates learned in real time that a charter can be faster than a speech. Elena Park stood beside the speaker, not grandstanding, simply present as the instrument of a promise. "The alarm is active," she told the gallery. "Observers are welcome on the transmission. This is your charter, too." The pirate craft were not ideologues, they were accountants with knives. When Sagan cut across their trajectory and lit them with a legal warning beam, the pirate captain made the most predictable mistake in a library of bad ideas. He dragged 3 creche pods into the main corridor and put guns in the same room as infants. He opened a channel and put on a grimace he thought looked like resolve. "Back off or the pods vent." Brooks' face did not change. "Article Roman III," she said into the net. "No combatant may use children as shields. Doing so designates your command unfit to exist." The words were not theater, they were architecture. In the next 10 seconds, a dozen pieces of faintly beautiful math unfolded. A human drone, slim as a reed, slipped along the freighter's external coolant spine and injected swelling foam into the pirate's hull vents. Temperature warnings began to scream. forcing the pirates to abandon their welds. A second drone printed a spiderweb of microfilament along the hostage corridor's atmosphere registers. On Brooks' mark, the web pulsed, overloading the pirates' weapon capacitors without burning oxygen. A third system, a repurposed agricultural fogger, filled the corridor with a low, shimmering haze loaded with metallic markers that human helmets were tuned to ignore, and pirate cheap optics magnified into blindness. "Sag into St. Brigid," came a calm voice, the tone civilian pilots learned from air traffic controllers and ER nurses. "Seal bulkheads 3A through 3D. We are about to open your front door with a very boring tool. Please do not be alarmed by the boredom." On the Dominion refugee barge, a woman with a dimmed crest, her name later recorded as Eka, held her children against her and asked, "What can we do?" The answer came back at once. "Sling your lifeboat's line abreast. Mark them with lantern beacons. You'll catch anything we drop that we cannot carry." The instructions were the opposite of heroic and exactly right. The door went not with an explosion, but with a sigh. Human Marines moved like plumbers, 1, 2, 3, and then a fourth in case someone had miscounted. The pirates fired into haze and hit nothing that could bleed. Weapons clattered to the floor as batteries died with a sound like rain. A Marine in a patched gauntlet cradled a creche pod as tenderly as if it hummed a lullaby. A second Marine, helmet cam broadcasting to the Council, held up 2 fingers to indicate 2 more pods and the kind of thumbs-up small children in any species understand. It was over in 4 minutes. No pirates dead, none heroic either. They had their command status revoked under Article Roman 3, which meant a very specific thing. The crew would spend the next 15 years working on stations where children learned to be alive, cleaning mess halls, scribing story walls, fixing playground domes, and every paycheck would be garnished into a compensation fund for those 8 creches and hundreds more like them. When the pirate captain protested at sentencing, Alina read a line from a book older than spaceflight. "You may choose your actions. You may not choose the consequences for others." Back in Cheyenne Deep, Ortiz listened to the debriefs and felt something unclench. "We built a door," she said into the room, "and when the first stranger knocked, we opened it." Brooks made sure the paperwork was elegant. Every entry from the Sagan team went into the witness archive. Helmet footage, drone telemetry, small choices annotated in human and Drachaley. She wrote, "Remember, these logs are for a jury of orphans, right like they're in the room now." She had used the line before Lantern. Now it had the force of law. At the Council, delegates who had feared the charter would be a license for obliteration watched, instead, an exercise in craft. A pacifist coalition's ambassador spoke first. "This protection feels different, not conquest, not performance, almost municipal." Elena nodded. "That is one of the most American compliments imaginable, Ambassador." Lord Marshal Core did not speak. He sat with his crest dim and watched a human Marine's glove touch a Dominion child's cheek through a pod window. When the feed ended, he signed his name to a compact that placed Dominion creches under Article I sanctuary anywhere they walked into a human port. He did not ask for a concession in return. Some griefs redact the appetite for bargaining. The charter had a precedent now, not a speech but a rescue. Precedents harden into habit. Habits are how law survives its own authors. On a corkboard in Cheyenne Deep, the chaplain pinned a child's crayon drawing of the Sagan's lantern beacon. Under it, someone had scrawled a sentence that would be printed on stickers and shipped bulkheads before the year was out. "We fix leaks. We don't flood houses." The Council's most controversial room wasn't the chamber with the crystal dome. It was a smaller auditorium with bad acoustics and cheap chairs, the deliberate indignity of a venue designed to seat power without flattering it. A bronze plate above the door read, "Witness Council, Session Hall A." A subtler plaque below read, "Chaired by Orphans." The Witness Council was Article Roman 4 made visible. 12 members, 4 human, 8 from other species, selected not for pedigree but for biography. Each had lost a parent or guardian to war or accident. Each had been raised in a community that decided not to pass that loss forward like an heirloom. They were teenagers by most measures, which made diplomats nervous and admirals honest. They began with Lantern. Elena Park asked to be sworn the old way. Hand raised, oath spoken aloud before strangers. Admiral Ortiz came next, uniform plain, rows of ribbons that looked like a history teacher's tedious syllabus. Colonel Brooks was last, carrying a satchel of drives like a deacon might bring a set of fragile relics. A human witness named Yi asked the first question. Admiral, why neutron devices in academies? Why not remove instructors alive? Why not arrest, not annihilate? Ortiz didn't reach for euphemism. Because our intel showed the academies doubled as hardened command nodes once a certain alarm went out. We could have used shaped charges or electron shredders and taken the buildings with the people. We chose a device that left the structures intact and the data recoverable. We are guilty of choosing speed and certainty over the risk of delay. We did not choose the path because it was easy. We chose it because it left food lines unbroken and hospitals powered. But I will not pretend it was clean. I still have to pray after, and that is not paperwork. A Dominion witness named Relach, crest scarred in the way of someone who had learned to bend without breaking, leaned forward. Ambassador Park, you spoke of surgery. Who gave a second opinion? Who told you when to stop cutting? Elena nodded toward the row of chaplains and ethicists, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, Buddhist, Lakota, secular humanist, sitting in plain clothes. They did, and my mother, and a teacher from Cleveland who wrote the line about children and laws that ended up in the Charter's preamble. Also the United Farm Workers, who reminded us that supply chains are human chains when you zoom in. Our second opinions were untidy because life is. The witnesses asked for footage. They did not clip the most glorious 15 seconds. They asked for the hour before and after. They watched the St. Bridget rescue and grimaced when a Marine slipped on a deck slick with coolant. They watched Lantern's cultural neutralizations and asked why human poems were planted under Drakhaley parade grounds. Brooks explained the difference between erasure and invitation. We didn't write our history. We placed a silence, and then we asked your poets to name it when they are ready. The most bracing testimony came from Eka, the Dominion mother from the refugee barge, flown in and still wearing the plain clothes of someone not performing for a camera. Human ships fed us, she said softly. Human nurses gave my small ones immunizations with needles that sang to order their fear. Human Marines arrested the men who would have sold us. But I have a question. Where were you 3 generations ago when the Predators wore uniforms and the markets had marble floors? Elena took the rebuke and did not try to turn it into a ribbon. On Earth, she said, learning a long lesson. We thought we could outsource the ethics of protection to committees. We learned the opposite, and now we have to earn the right to act in a galaxy that remembers when we were not here. Before adjournment, the Witness Council issued their first set of interpretive notes. Not law, but lamp posts on the path. Note 1. Where a neutralization can be replaced by a confiscation without increasing risk to children, choose confiscation. Note 2. Publish casualty audits within 7 days of every charter action. Note 3. Create a reparations school fund seeded by charter signatories and fed by criminal garnishments. Note 4. No secret law. Every ROE that applies to children's safety must be posted in public registries in every language of every signatory. Ortiz signed beneath each note without stalling. If the rules don't hurt a little, she told Brooks, they are fake. The Witness Council's last act surprised those who expected only scolding. They invited Core to the dais. He came without armor. A child-sized Dominion tunic dangled from his broad hand. This belonged to my son, he said, who survived because your people built a shelter out of a concert hall my people once used to sing about killing our enemies. He sleeps now under a human lullaby about stars that are friendly. I signed the charter for him, not for you. The orphans stood, not applause precisely, a body language that meant, we see the hinge you are trying to become. Afterward, journalists asked Alina if she resented submitting to a council chaired by teenagers. "No," she said. "We wanted a court that remembers the one question adults forget when comfortable. Will this make the next child safer? Everything else is precedent talk. That question is civilization." The abstainers had names, and those names did not translate neatly into languages built for trade. One of them, a people of desert and aurora called the Solace Triune by outsiders, chose distance as their ancestors' medicine. They lived under a sullen star that flared like a temper. When the star hiccuped, an ugly coronal belch that melted antenna farms and blistered crops, the Triune sent a message that a week earlier they would have burned. "We request temporary shelter for our children under Article I without political entanglement." Alina didn't convene a summit. She called a logistics officer and a poet. "We will dock 3 hospital ships at the edge of their sovereignty," she said. "We will carry no uniforms in their villages, only coveralls. We will ask what name they use for bread." The Solace Expeditions, so named by a nurse from Manila who thought declarations should sound like hospitality, were a different theater of the charter. Human Marines stacked water bricks and learned to say thank you in a language that used light in the throat. A Dominion engineer taught Triune farmers to fix a brittle pump with cloth and a prayer. When the pump sputtered into life, the engineer cried and did not pretend otherwise. A human school ship unfolded like a flower into 30 classrooms, and an auditorium where elders told stories about a goddess who became a well. The stories were recorded, translated, and archived at the witness library, because protection without memory is just a gentler kind of neglect. The Triune leadership met Alina at the boundary stone between their wind and human air. "We did not sign your charter," their speaker said. "We do not wish to owe debts." Alina pointed at the relief scaffolds. "You won't," she said. "You will leave a mural, paint the story of the day you asked for help without giving your children names to strangers who'd sell them. We will hang the mural in our ports and read its captions before we vote on new budgets." The speaker tilted their head. "This is an odd empire." "It isn't," Alina said. "Empire asks for tribute, stewardship asks to be held to account." A week into the expedition, deep-range watchers in Cheyenne picked up a pattern. A gravitational thrum where no planets should be, a neatly spaced lattice of perturbations that smelled like architecture. Admiral Ortiz stared at the plot and smiled a tired, private smile. "The universe is timely," she told Brooks. "When you shore up one levee, the river tries another bend." "Threat assessment?" Brooks asked. "Not yet," Ortiz said. "Curiosity assessment first." They sent Kepler's Mercy, a survey cutter with a crew split by design, scientists who would rather hug a strange rock than shoot a familiar one, and a small detachment of Marines who had learned in the St. Bridget rescue that bravery sometimes means holding a flashlight steady. What they found, 3-0 from the Triune Sun, was not a weapon but a library gate. A ring of dark matter anchors older than the Council, built by someone who had used the word memorial in mathematics. The gate sang a narrow-band song to any species that could hear. "Store your dangerous beauties here. Take them back when you grow wise." There was a temptation, so old Alina recognized it like a family resemblance, to claim the gate as proof of destiny and plant a flag. She did none of that. She asked the witness council for a field session under the auroras. Orphans sat on heated stones and listened as physicists explained the gate in metaphors designed for humans and Triune children alike. Then the orphans voted to write a new Note 5. Weapons too good to be swung in anger belong in libraries with locks and curious librarians. The Triune were named the first librarians. Humans installed the locks and left the keys hanging on hooks labeled in 3 languages, open only when the smallest are safe. There were protests. There always are when a story refuses to become a statue. A federation of border miners wanted the gate stripped for parts. A media baron broadcast nightly monologues about human overreach. A human senator wanted a ribbon cutting. Elena, who had grown up in a neighborhood where block parties taught civic patience, stood at a folding table with a coffee urn and explained the charter again. "We do not hoard," she said. "We also do not outsource our fear to markets. If you need a fixed point in your sky, look at the mural the Triune painted. The charter is not a crown. It is a habit of care." When the Solace expeditions folded away their scaffolds, the Triune did not sign the charter. They painted a second mural instead, this one of a school ship unfolding under green light. "We will owe you nothing," the caption read in Triune glyphs and English. "But we will remember that you arrived without asking for names." Elena counted it a better signature than ink. On the last night, children of 3 species braided a rope around the boundary stone, bright threads knotted by small fingers into an absurdly strong line. The adults learned the lesson and kept quiet. The wind made a sound that human technicians described as static and Triune elders called singing. A year after New Thessaly, the memorial on the council wall had acquired a patina that gathered in the corners of letters. Ceremonies had a way of becoming furniture. Elena Park refused to let the names become a backdrop. She scheduled the anniversary for a weekday at an unpompous hour and banned podium florals. The program had 2 features, a roll call of the St. Brigid's 8 creche pods, alive and loud, their guardians promising to tell them only what they could bear when they could bear it, and a reading of the witness notes by the orphans who had authored them. Admiral Ortiz attended in dress uniform because respect is also a habit. She had a retirement letter in her pocket and a stubborn ache in her knees. She shook Cor's hand before the ceremony. His crest had begun to re-brighten in the cautious way scars learn to be skin. He introduced his son by a new name that meant branch after fire. The boy hid behind his father's leg for 4 seconds, then stared at the human medals and asked, in excellent English learned on a refugee station school ship, "Do your stars hurt when you sleep?" "Sometimes," Ortiz said, "but mostly they help me find the bathroom in the dark." Laughter is a good solvent. It dissolves dignity's harder crusts. After the ceremony, Elena took the floor one last time and did not speak for long. "We are not finished," she said. "There will be new leaks. The gate will hum at us like a temptation. Someone will try to use a school as a shield and call it cleverness. When we fail, the witnesses will call us into hall again. That is the promise. Not that we do no harm, but that we are not allowed to lie about it." She quoted not a general, but a teacher who had taught civics in a room with a broken radiator and 3 working hearts. Justice is not a verdict. It is a recurring appointment. Bring a notebook. In the months that followed, the charter matured into the kind of thing civilizations do without thinking about it, and therefore must be taught on purpose. Merchant guilds rewrote boilerplate to include Article I sanctuary clauses by reflex. Pirates stopped broadcasting manifestos about freedom and started applying for clemency work details because the charter's labor terms were, perversely, the first honest job most had ever known. Councils that had once bragged about their neutral law now bragged earnestly about their witness literacy. A generation of children learned to say mutual alarm before they learned trigonometry. Elena stepped away from ambassadorship between 2 sentences. She walked into a school on New Thessaly that had been rebuilt not in the footprint of the old hospital, but across from a garden where parents with knit brows could watch kids without pretending not to. The head teacher was a Dominion exile named Relach, who had asked for the position with a letter that made superlatives shy. "I know what creches smell like when they are safe. I will learn what they smell like when they are loved." Elena taught 1 class a week. Argument without cruelty. Children argued, which meant the class was alive. Ortiz retired to a small house near the ocean, the kind of place where tides do their clean arithmetic. On her first morning as a civilian, she stood on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched a cutter nose across the horizon, its lantern beacon a slow wink like an old friend. She cried, because officers who do not cry at decency have made worse mistakes elsewhere. Colonel Brooks took her chair in Cheyenne and kept the corkboard with the crayon drawing. She added a second drawing underneath. the library gate with keys hanging from hooks. A sticky note between them read, "Fix leaks, lock libraries, keep singing." Core returned to a world whose shrines were silent and found that silence can be a square to build on. He sponsored a school that taught the Dominion's children how to read the old poems aloud without wanting to obey them. The curriculum included mechanics, mediation, and a course in cooking for warriors who had never boiled an egg. He sent Alina a photograph of a graduation where caps were a borrowed custom, and the tassels looked endearingly like badly groomed crests. The council, once a hall for the theatrics of equality, became something quieter and stranger, a help desk with gravity. Delegates brought maps and school budgets, and complaints about the price of bolt thread and questions about whether Article Roman 3 forbade a particular tactic that looked clever on a whiteboard and monstrous in a hallway. The habit of care took practice. They practiced. Not all stories ended in tidiness. A slaving ring tried to reopen a route under a fog of paperwork. A charter action took it apart like an old engine. A governor somewhere misread stewardship as permission and learned in witness hall why those words are not synonyms. The abstainers abstained until their grandchildren didn't, because children hate adult vendettas almost as much as they hate cold soup. The gate kept humming, patient as a library that trusts winter and spring. On the second anniversary, no speeches were scheduled. The memorial wall remained, names deep as always. People came by in twos and threes, with lunch pails and strollers and grief that had learned to stand without collapsing. A janitor from a species that smelled like cinnamon polished the lower panels because fingerprints accrete. He whistled a tune that kids had picked up in ports. The Lantern Song, written by a nurse with a cheap guitar on a night she thought she'd break. Alina, passing by on her way to teach, pressed her palm to the cool stone. She did not ask for forgiveness or declare a mission accomplished. She whispered the charter's backbone to herself like a household prayer: sanctuary, alarm, clarity, witness, boundary. She added quietly the sixth article that lived only in her pocket notebook and her bones: neighborliness. A child tugged at her sleeve and asked if humans really built memorials out of promises. Alina considered the honest answer. "No," she said. "We build them out of work, and we call the work a promise so we remember to show up tomorrow." HFY myths always end with a shout. This one ended with a schedule: ships to inspect, schools to visit, witnesses to brief, murals to dust. The galaxy did not tremble. It learned to breathe in a new cadence that left room for small lungs. Somewhere under a sullen star, an elder told a story about a time the wind sang and strangers arrived with water and rules. Children fell asleep before the ending, safe enough to dream badly and wake laughing. This, then, was the memorial the charter had meant to build. Not a statue in the echo of a dome, but a certainty you could live in, teach in, grow weird and excellent inside. The names on the wall stayed names. The work around them stayed work. And when the next alarm sounded, as it always will, hands moved with a neighbor's competence toward the switch.